Hello everyone, my guest today is Oleg Agapov, Senior Analytics Engineer at Hiive, based in Vancouver with over 12 years of experience turning messy data into reliable models that teams actually use for reporting, experimentation, and decision making. Oleg works deeply in the modern data stack, that is SQL, dbt, Snowflake, BigQuery, and he is also the author of the Cracking the Analytics Engineering and Interview, a book built specifically for people trying to break into this field. Beyond the technical work, he has built a genuine following on LinkedIn, working honestly about what the analytics engineering career path actually looks like in terms of the mindset shift, the mistakes, the parts nobody actually talks about. And I've been following his content for a while now, and I'm really excited to have him on the Data Talk with Doers today. Thank you for being here, Oleg. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, thanks for having me, Nima. Yeah, I hope we will have a great discussion today.
Great, great. So, to get started, for anyone who hasn't come across your work yet, how would you describe what you do in a plain language for someone who's never heard of analytics engineering?
Right, for sure. Yeah, I mean, when I usually describe my work and like if, the person is very far away from, IT, and like technologies, I usually say that, I'm developer. It's the easiest way to explain. But if obviously, if you work in company, even if you're not in like technology, everyone knows what analytics is, right? Because everyone does some kind of an analysis, right? Whether it's like spreadsheets or, BI tool, dashboards, whatever. So usually I say that I'm the person who provides clean and structured data for analysis, right? Because everyone knows that again, no matter you work with Excel or BI dashboard, if the data you work with is messy and um, not structured, hard to work with, it's usually visible, right? And everyone struggles. So I usually say that, yeah, I help making this data more structured, cleaner, easier to use, more reliable, stuff like that.
Great. Yeah, that's the most plain language that you can say what it is that you're doing. So you're based in Vancouver, and how may I ask how did you end up in Canada and especially in this field of specific corner of the world like analytics engineering?
Right. I mean, yeah, Canada was just like the choice, where I want to live.
Mhm.
But the like the field where I work, like analytics and analytics engineering specifically, it's my whole career basically, not analytics engineering specifically, but analytics in general, because I started as data analyst, and I worked for like maybe 8 years as data analyst, so analyzing data, providing reports, finding insights, writing reports like board reports, right?
Yeah.
So all kinds of level from department level to C level. And at some point, I figured that I'm a little bit like I always fight bad data. Like that was the narrative of my whole career, that I'm fighting with errors, um, unstructured data, all those problems. So at some point, I figured that I more enjoy actually building the data itself, right? Make it usable, make it clean. And so for me, it was kind of a natural shift that, oh, from just analyzing the data, which is kind of the end product, like of analytics function, right? I shifted more towards like middle side, I would say, right? Where I take the data provided, by data engineers, like by the data platform, and I make use out of this data so that everyone, downstream, like data analysts or data scientists, they could use my work, right? Leverage my work and then build their reporting analysis.
What do you think that somebody wish you have told you from the day one and now that you realize now?
My career, and maybe a lot of people with a similar, path as I am, we all have kind of unique like learning paths and unique careers, which means that
Yeah.
it's very hard to, give you like a one specific advice
Okay.
that, you should start there, or, you should go there. It's
Okay.
very individual because some people are, like for example, let's speak about myself, right? I started in analytics because I felt that this is something that I want to do, right?
Mm.
So I've done some analysis and reporting for quite a while, and then I figured that, this is not exactly what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I
Mm.
felt like, if I would do like more technical job, it would fit me better, right? So I
Okay.
started picking up some smaller, parts of like technical work, right? And this is where I end up, right? I
Yeah.
know that some people may be having like the opposite. So I know
Yeah.
that some people started in like development, they started like in backhands, and then
Yeah.
they switched to data engineering, but they still felt that, they are not having enough impact on the business,
Mm.
not delivering like much business value. So they actually switched to be more closer to business stakeholders, and now they work with like as data analysts, data scientists. So they kind of on this end of this analytics
Yeah.
stack, right? So where they work closely with the business. So I would say my only advice is just listen to yourself, like where you are most comfortable,
Yeah.
and then like your heart will kind of help you decide where you want to go.
Great. So was there a specific project or a moment that caused that shift? Like you thinking of, okay, I want to go more technical.
Um, you could say yes, but so on one hand, I always had struggles with like unclear data and like unusable data, or like
Yeah.
hard to use data, right? So I always had like in my work a part where I work like this technical um, part, right? Where I had to write SQL or clean the data or like transform it somehow or get it even, right? But at some point, like before I actually switched full time to analytics engineering, I actually worked as BI engineer. So my job was to, take the data, transform it, and present on a dashboard, right? And back then I worked with Looker, if you're familiar. So Looker is good product, but unfortunately I didn't like the development of this product, but that's the other story. So my point is, I worked with the stakeholders, right? I worked with like with what they want to see on the dashboard. And again, I had the struggle that in order to present the data in a way that I want on the dashboard, right, I had to go upstream, to data modeling part, do everything there, prepare the data how I want it to be, right? And only then, continue like BI development. So this is where when I figured that, I'm actually more enjoying doing like the upstream work of data modeling, data testing, data cleaning, more than I enjoy like working with like semantic layers and, dashboards. Yeah, and then once it was actually a project for we were working on a project called board reporting, right? So we prepared like a set of dashboards which our board members looked at, right? And so once I finished this project, I told my manager, "Hey, I feel like that I'm more enjoying doing the data modeling part and less enjoying doing the dashboarding part," and that's how I basically.
I also found on your LinkedIn that you wrote a post where you said the post may basically mention juniors dive straight into the IDE where seniors first define the problem. So when did that shift happen for you personally?
Exactly, yeah. So this is actually not only applicable for analytics engineer. I would say it's like applicable broadly to any kind of IT specialist. So I remember myself when I was like, 10 years ago, I was a data analyst, and whenever I had like a new request, my first instinct was, open IDE and just query the database to see the data for myself, right? This led to some mistakes in a way that, if something is unclear, I assumed some parts, right? I assumed that, this is probably going to be like sensible information to give to a stakeholder based on like the requirements that, I got. Those assumptions were wrong, right? Because I wasn't, especially like if you only like started in the company, you are still fresh, you may not know all the business context, right? So your assumptions sometimes wrong, right? Which means I end up doing the same work twice. So one where I got the requirement, I sprinkled my own assumptions. I get the report, I show the numbers, and stakeholders' response was like, "Oh, this is not exactly what I wanted. Let's, add this and that." And so, I I got this feedback. I went back to kind of working in ID, working with SQL, refining the numbers and presenting them once again, right? And then, I had the full picture. So, and this is where I started to kind of see the pattern that, if I get like initial requirements, and if I'm not following up on those requirements, if I'm not clearing like out as much as possible in terms of requirements, I may end up doing the wrong thing, right? Which will lead to double work anyway.
Yeah.
So basically, yeah, you just start. So at some point I figured, if I have those requirements, let me clarify if I understand those requirements correctly, right?
Right.
The worst case scenario, you just spend, like 20, 30 minutes talking to stakeholders, and you are on the same page, and all good, you can proceed. But if some of your assumptions were wrong, right, you will be able to clarify them before you actually start doing the work itself.
Got it, got it. Yeah, that's very important lesson to learn, because most of the time, having to do the same work twice is not that great. So,
For sure, I can tell you.
what kind of task or something that happens when you are an analytics engineer and it's a difficult day?
Right. Sometimes it's hard when you get those requirements, when you have, like, for example, a new project, right? Let's say, there is a new feature on the platform in the product, right? And you need to somehow quantify this feature, right? It means that, meaning you need to build some models for it, you need to build some metrics, maybe some dashboards. Maybe if you are not enough understand this new feature, right? It actually could be hard for you, like, at least for me, right, to go and just do the job, right?
Yeah.
There are known unknowns, right? There are some
Right.
parts that you don't understand yet.
Yeah.
So again, a lot of time I dedicate in those like complex tasks to actually speak to stakeholders, to speak to team members, who develop the feature, to engineers, to product managers who would use my work, when it's done. Because the hardest part for me is to understand what exactly I need to deliver so that it will be useful, right?
Yeah.
And it will make impact. Because again, if for example, I would assume that, it's gonna be enough for me just to take the data from the data platform, apply some star schema and give to stakeholders in hopes that they will understand what it means, right? So
Yeah.
this is not true, right? You need to understand as an analytics engineer what exactly you're trying to deliver, right? And what exactly, and you can do this by asking stakeholders, hey, how do you want to estimate this feature? How do you know that this feature is useful for our users, right? How do you know that this feature brings some ROI to the company, right? And just by talking and like exploring all those possibilities, possible metrics, possible breakdowns, it actually gives me a lot of understanding how I need to do my work, right?
Right.
So, and then all the rest, I would say the technical parts become very easy, right? Once you know all the parts that you need to, stitch together. Oh,
Yeah.
you need like this set of metrics, you need this set of dimensions, and you need to present it like on a dashboard in some way. Then the technical part is actually easy because you have already all the pieces of the puzzle, right? You just need to go and implement. So for me, again, maybe that's my experience talking here, right? But usually the technical part is the easiest part, and communication and presentation is much harder because it involves working with the people. It involves clarifying all those known unknowns and unknown unknowns, right? Yeah, that's I would say that's the most kind of hard part of my job.
So, in terms of analytics engineering, so if for a person like a data analyst or a BI engineer thinking about moving into analytic engineering space, what is the gap that they most consistently underestimate?
Um, Probably like the easy answer is probably the data modeling
Hmm.
and thinking about the system as a whole. So data modeling is actually, again, probably somehow connected to this requirements and stakeholders part, right? So because we all know there are great resources on how to model the data, right? Like
Yeah.
dimensional modeling for analytics is very popular. It fits like 99% of the cases you want to work with, right? And usually what I see, the juniors are a bit underestimating how important data modeling is, right? So they don't think about the future, they don't think about like scalability, they don't think about maintainability. This is one part of the equation. The second part, as I said, to look at the data transformation layer holistically, which means that you do not only provide like produce SQL, right? SQL is just the code that works for you and transforms your data, but there are other parts that go hand in hand with the code. So, for example, data quality, right? How can you be sure that your transformations are correct if you are not sure if your source is correct, right? So
Yeah.
applying like proper testing, applying proper assumption about the data that is coming, right? The other part of this is obviously data documentation, right? So how can you explain what your transformation does in a way that if you show it to with some external people, they will understand it, right? For example, we at our company we have this convention that all the data marts, so the layer of transformation layer that is exposed in our BI tool to
Yeah.
our consumers, it must have all the definitions of what the model is, what the columns are, what are assumptions about these columns, because our BI tool actually allows to see documentation like in the BI tool itself. So for every single column, you will be able to see, oh, I forgot like what active user means. You just click on the three dots, go to the documentation. In the BI tool itself, you see, oh, okay, this is the definition of how we define active user, right? My point is the data transformation is not stopping at SQL, right? It's also thinking about data quality, data documentation, and maybe if you like feel like to go beyond that, you can even start thinking about how often we deliver the data, SLAs, how you integrate with with external parties. So, for example, one way you get the data, for example, from external sources to data warehouse. But for example, in my case, we also have contracts where data from the data warehouse going back to some other sources, right? So we support like CRM, we support Salesforce, we support we send back some data to the platform, right? Which means that now we think not only about our isolated transformations, we also think about downstream impact that we have, right? So that's important for analytics engineer, for data analysts and BI engineers who would want to kind of switch to analytics engineering, to actually start thinking more holistically about this whole process. Not only I will just write SQL every day
Yeah.
and that's all. No, obviously not.
So you also posted about the data platform frameworks like ingestion, warehouse, transformation, orchestration, and visualization. So if someone is starting from nothing right now, like in 2026, what is your honest recommendation or opinion on the stacks, like the modern data stack?
Yeah, the whole, like, if we do like a step back, the whole idea of modern data stack was that we democratize parts of the stack that previously required engineering resources, right? And now, like, person who just understand the high level concepts can work with the stack. So one example is, for example, Fivetran, right? Previously you would have to, like, in order to ingest data from whatever, Google Analytics, like Salesforce, or the like Postgres database into your data warehouse, you would have to write some code, right? You would have to define some pipelines. You would have to define some SLAs for those pipelines. So it's a lot of engineering work, right? You could say this is of software engineering and not data work, right?
Yeah.
Which means that when Fivetran came, they said, like, hey, what you need to do is just tell us what is your source, what is your destination, and we will handle all the in between for you, right?
Nice.
And that allowed juniors, for example, if you start today, you don't have to know how to write Python to extract data from Postgres and put it to Snowflake, right? You can just use the tools, Fivetran and many others like Airbyte, Stitch, so a lot of them, where you just buy the tool, right? You like, the whole setup will take you probably like half a day from all your sources to the data warehouse, right? So, and in half a day, you already can start delivering value by just working directly on the data and not on the integration part, right? The same for data warehouse, right? Previously, maybe like 10 years ago, it was, it required some database administrators, some database developers to set it up correctly, to set up permissions, to set up the cluster, et cetera, et cetera. Now you have, BigQuery, now you have Snowflake. Redshift probably was the pioneer, who basically said that, hey, here's a button, you click the button, and you have a working database. You have a working data warehouse, right? So right now, it's super easy to start because actually, utilizing those modern data stack tools, you can build the whole like data platform as a like single person. Ingestion, you need like data warehouse, you maybe need like activation layer, maybe some, like, it's usually called like reverse ETL, where you push your data somewhere else. And you may have like transformation, something like DBT, DBT cloud. This is the only part where you would need to write code, right? So it's very easy to start today, and more technologies emerge, like DuckDB and DuckDB Cloud, which allows you to start from your laptop, and once you are ready, you can just push it to cloud, and everyone can benefit from the same like build that you built initially on your laptop. Now you can give it to everyone in the team, right? So obviously, like, the tooling is still evolving, still very like exciting projects and
Right.
products
Yeah.
appearing like every day.
Yeah.
But I would say the core, like the
Uh-huh.
ingestion, data warehouse, transformations, and activations, and even dashboarding, right?
So that is very interesting, like list of products that you mentioned, because I suppose you have to write a post on it. I'm sure many people will be curious to know. So you mentioned DBT, and I'm sure DBT has been very famous in the field of analytic engineer, more of like a synonymous. And I'm curious to know where are its genuine limitations and what do you think, and what do you use when you hit those limitations in terms of DBT?
Right, for sure. Yeah, I mean, obviously, DBT and DBT Labs, they coined the title analytics engineer, right? So they
Oh.
figured that, you know, um, those people who do this
Huh.
work need to have a title. So it's actually their invention.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
Um, and so if we talk about limitations and application of DBT, so DBT is data transformation tool, and historically they started with SQL transformation, right? Which
Yeah.
means that there are obviously like a couple of prerequisites for using DBT. So one of them is you need to have a data warehouse. Another one is that you need to have all the data already available in the data warehouse, right? And all the end transformations will be stored in the same data warehouse, right? So these are like main kind of limitations and prerequisites for using DBT, which means that if your stack does not fit in this pattern, right?
Yeah.
Probably DBT is not the best tool. Maybe DBT can be a part of your project platform, right? So, for example, if you require to send data somewhere else, DBT won't work, right? Because DBT only works within a single data warehouse. If you want to export data from somewhere else, transform and put into your data warehouse, DBT also doesn't work, right? Because again, DBT works within a single data warehouse. However, if you combine with this modern data stack where you basically pull all the data, like external data, to your data warehouse first, then you apply DBT, like DBT transformations, and store the final models again in the same data warehouse, and then you use some other tools like BI tools and reverse ETL tools that would export this data to some external sources. Then you're good, right? This is a good kind of
Yeah.
application. However, if you are if you like, I don't know, some online game that needs like real-time processing of
Yeah.
streaming events, or like if you're
Right.
a mobile app, right, and you care about, like, you are Uber, right, you need to know when someone books a car, you need to know immediately, right, which means
Yeah.
that DBT wouldn't fit here, right, because DBT is not real-time. DBT only uses like mainly uses SQL. They do have kind of Python transformations, but they are very limited and they are like platform specific. So I would say I wouldn't recommend, right?
Mm.
So only if to summarize, so DBT is good for transformations. DBT is good for batch transformations, right? So not real-time streaming. And
Mm.
DBT is good for analytics. So if you would try to apply it, outside of analytics, I would say it's going to be painful because, usually if you do like transactional database and you need some fast results where you process the data as soon as it lands, DBT is not for that, right? DBT is like slow in this case, right? And its purpose to just batch process your data and prepare it for analytics. I hope that explains.
You talked about there are a lot of products, and now people, if they're starting, not much coding is required. So now AI tools are also changing how things work, right? How this work also get done. So what has actually changed in your day-to-day workflow, in terms of how AI has been uplifting, or what has changed theoretically in your workflow for AI?
Yeah, AI and all those LLMs and developments, they are very great. And like one thing that I see is they actually intensified my work in a way,
Okay.
because what AI allows you to do is to automate all the like boring and repetitive tasks that you do
Yeah.
manually, right? You can now outsource to AI. The thing is, like one example I can give you is I probably stopped writing SQL that much
Mm.
nowadays, right? Because writing SQL is pretty much commodity right now. So
Mm.
if you have pretty defined, requirements and the scope of the task that you try to achieve, try to complete, AI is pretty much capable of doing all the work for you, right? I'm doing way more is code review. And I believe like everyone who works with AI feel the same way. Now that, AI can speed up code
Mm.
development,
Yeah.
we are like humans are, a bottleneck of reviewing this code and actually delivering, right? And clicking like merge and deliver to production. So yeah, on the upside, I could say, I started delivering 2 to 3 times more tasks, like changes to our data model, and like it's visible. So we keep track of how many changes we like deploy weekly, and we
Mm.
clearly see the trend that we are going upwards, right? So we're going like
Yeah.
we're delivering more and more with the
Yeah.
same resources we had half a year ago.
Right.
So yeah, it's definitely an interesting tool, and like I encourage everyone to actually start utilizing it in their work. One kind of gotcha is, unfortunately, it's not replacing us, right? Even though it writes code for me, I still need to understand what the code does, right? I
Yeah.
still need to understand fundamentals of the code so I can catch all the mistakes and potential bugs that AI can introduce in their work.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's also important in terms of validating what AI does, because you never know, it can has hallucinate and give something else also. Yeah.
Yeah, you can. So if you heard, there is this a concept of harnesses, right, where you can actually try to minimize those hallucinations, back and forth assumptions, where you
Yeah.
can basically, if you provide the proper context, if you provide proper conventions,
Mm.
if you start utilizing like skills and commands, um, you can kind of give it the proper way of delivering
Yeah.
the work without going sideways and like hallucinate stuff. But it's not a guarantee that it won't
Yeah.
produce some nonsense at times.
Yeah. And also, you wrote a book called Cracking the Analytics Engineering Interviews, right? So, um, what made you write that book, and what gap you think that you saw nobody else was addressing in terms of analytics engineer interviews?
The idea for the book came from actually from one of my followers who I spoke with, and this follower tried to actually switch from QA engineering into analytics engineering, right?
Mhm.
So we went through the process, like what is your technical skills, what are your soft skills, what like how do you envision this work, this new title. And I actually gathered like a bunch of resources about it,
Oh,
some artifacts like we spoke about this topic, we spoke about like technical interview, we spoke about like hiring manager interview.
yeah.
So at some point I just gathered a lot of materials,
Oh,
and I was like, okay, maybe if it was useful for this person. And
wow.
actually at times, and I still have sometimes questions in my DMs like, hey, I'm working as X, how can I switch to analytics engineering? So I felt that this is a good signal to me to actually convert this into some standalone course, but actually, just end up compiling a book out of it, right? And here you go. I just released the book on how to pass the analytics engineering interview. One problem that I also tried to solve is to give a framework. Because usually, I like at my work, obviously sometimes we hire, analytics engineers. So I'm participating as interviewer in those, right, in those activities. And I saw how many candidates come unprepared to the interview, in the sense that they have no idea like what to expect. And when I ask them, in my opinion, like simple questions, or like, I expect them to behave in some way, right? And they clearly like miss the mark, and like not explain, like not giving me what I want to see in good analytic engineer, right? So that was kind of intersection of my own struggle as interviewer, and also like struggle of some of my followers who asked me like, hey, how can I switch?
Great.
So this framework should give you enough information on obviously how to pass the interview, but also what to prepare, right? Because if you're if you don't know what analytics engineering is, I actually have like a chapter about explaining what is the day-to-day work of analytics engineers.
So I think that book is also very important because people get confused what to really prepare for analytic engineering. Like SQL is everywhere, but it depends on how the questions can be framed, right? Like data analysts use SQL in a different way. Data engineers use SQL in a different programming language, but can be used for different purposes. So it's really important that you have put forth the framework, and I'm curious to also get that book, because I personally don't see much technical interview preparations there outside for analytic engineer, and this seems to be a great resource for anyone trying to deep dive in.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you should try. I like on one hand in the book I tried to spend more time explaining like the process and like possible scenarios, more than giving you some like exact questions. Obviously, I do give some questions like if you are like on a SQL interview, expect this, right? And I basically just take my own experience where I was a candidate or an interviewer, and this is what I actually asked, or this is what I was actually asked, right? So you can use it as a guide, and I also give some prompts. I also posted about it that if you're preparing like for the technical work like DBT, data modeling, SQL, it's actually quite good to prepare with AI. So you can ask it to be an interviewer interviewing for analytics engineering position, and you are good at SQL. Now ask me 10 questions about SQL, and estimate my answers and like give me a feedback. So it's a good tool because AI is actually quite good at technical parts, right? So it's a very cool tool to use to prepare.
Right. So now when we are talking about interviews, some interview stages do have homework assignment, and so in terms of analytic engineering, what do you see most often? Is it a homework assignment, or people really look forward to see portfolio projects? What is actually happening out there, and what impresses the interviewer?
Right. One thing is, so you may or may not have home task for like take home, right, during the interview. Depends obviously on the company, but if you do have it, the one problem that I see in candidates is that sometimes they assume that if they prepare code, the code should speak for itself, and the code should give them the position, which in terms of home assignment, the code actually is secondary. What is more important, like when we give take home assignment to our candidates, is we want to see how they think of, like, how they approach the problem, right? And it starts maybe even from, sometimes we on purpose give some vague requirements, right? Sometimes we give some, we provide some data sets, and we, inject some like bugs or like data quality issues in there, because we want to see like whether candidate will be able to find those, mistakes and bugs and inconsistencies. So in the end, when I, interview someone and I check their take-home assignment, two parts. So one part is obviously their project ideally should be working, because I've seen sometimes people just send me some sequels without the project, without anything, without any way for me to reproduce their work, which is not good. Like, right? It's kind of, why did you send me some sequels? Like that's not the purpose. And the other part is obviously how they present their work. Like, do they have README? Do they have maybe some slides or diagrams? Do they explain their way of thinking, right? Do they give me like paragraph on the assumptions that they made, right? And in general, like when looking at this README, I also try to see, is there a story, right? Because usually every single like project, every single requirement, you can turn into a story, right? Where you have, this is the problem, this is what we tried, this is what we achieved, and these are the results, right? One way you can, for example, right, present it. Obviously, I would look into, if there is a presentation, I would ask how they derived at this point, what were their like problems, like did they see any problems with the project, what are their recommendations maybe, right? So I would try to frame this interview more like a real project. How would I work with this person like on a real project, and just ask the same real questions I would ask on a job, right? When it comes to technical, I would ask, hey, did you test your code, right? Did you write the data quality checks? Did you document your code? How did you know that this code will perform, and won't cause like bottlenecks and performance lags in production, right? If the candidate spends some time doing this take home, right? Usually it's like a couple of hours, right? It's usually visible that they actually done the work versus they just put this to ChatGPT and then copy pasted the result, right? Because if the candidate can explain their code, I know that they understand it, right? They created it, and like they can argue about it. This is what I'm looking in candidates, right? I don't want just like a copy paste monkey who could just put the code, like put a prompt to ChatGPT and give me ChatGPT answer, right? This is not what I'm looking for.
And you now, in terms of building audience, you have been posting consistently on LinkedIn and also building a lot of great connections. So when did you start? When did you thought of starting posting content on LinkedIn, and what was the motivation? Like, was it more of a career driven or building a community or something else that you had in mind?
Right. Yeah, I would say it's some kind of a mix. So, and it helps my career it helps me building the audience. It helps me, connect with some people who I, only admired in the past, but now, we are friends. And also I always had this. I always liked to kind of pass my knowledge, to someone else. Maybe because when I was a junior, I was looking for such resources myself, right? I didn't have that many resources, right? So, and, person who I would look for and, learn from them. So probably that's why now I became this person who could,
Right.
who could share my experience, share my knowledge with
Right.
someone who seeks for it. So, yeah,
Yeah.
that's probably the main motivation for me.
Great, great. That really helps because for people like us who look forward to get information and you have been on the job for a while, you know what's happening in the inside world. So those posts really helps a lot. Another question is like for someone technically strong but are invisible online. Not everyone posts on LinkedIn. People do have shyness. They have that imposter syndrome. So, what is the most important thing that you want them to understand about building a professional presence?
Not everyone needs to build it.
Hmm.
So I know a couple of great engineers, and I'm really sorry that they are not posting online because I know that their knowledge is gold, right?
Hmm.
But for them, it's actually good enough just do their work, do their best, right? And for them, it's enough to see the impact that they do on the business, right? And it's totally fine. So I actually accepted that, yeah, for them, it's totally fine. They are technically strong. They are maybe strong in like, project management or like in general in their career. And for them it's actually fine not to spread the word and like share this experience. For them it's absolutely fine to just see the impact they have on the business. If you feel like you want to share and like you're shy that oh my colleague will see my post, or like I don't know, my
Yeah.
friend will see, oh my gosh, I'm embarrassed. I would say shatter all those talks and like in your head that, everyone would see it, is to actually start producing something that helped you in your career, right?
Hmm.
Something that you learned,
Hmm.
some projects that you accomplished and you feel like, oh, I'm actually proud of this work, right? And a lot of great stories online, they were made exactly this way. Someone finished the project, they were very excited the project, they were very excited of what they've accomplished, right? Uh, and like their stories got many views and likes and feedback and comments and so on. If you feel that you don't have such projects,
Yeah.
for example, if this was actually my case, so I didn't have a lot of projects that I could brag about. So I was like, okay, what if I just start sharing what I know, what I've done, like on very small level, right? For example, I learned, I don't know, how to efficiently write data tests in DBT, right? Or how to, I don't know, lead the project that do from start to finish on your own, right? Something small in a way that you can make a post, LinkedIn
Hmm.
post, right? So I
Hmm.
believe LinkedIn has the great sweet spot between, for example, like Twitter or like X, where you have small amount of words you can put, right?
Yeah.
Versus some like bloggers platform like Medium, right, where you have to write very long posts, or like even the Substack, right? You
Yeah.
usually need to write,
Yeah.
where LinkedIn is actually in the middle, right? So
Yeah.
you can give like 200, 300 words post, which will be useful, where you
Hmm.
can actually, it's enough words to express yourself, right? And it's enough words like to give some value to someone who seeks for it. So yeah, that's why, like, if you feel like, if you are technical, if you work in the field, be it BI engineering, data analysis, whatever, there are many people like you who also seek for this information. And if they read you and they see that, this person already struggled through this problem and they solved it and they now giving me their advice, they will appreciate and they will subscribe. And then the next time, your colleague who you were like shy, that they will see your posts and they see your post and you have like whatever, 1,000 likes and like 100 comments, they will start appreciating you, right? Because you've done something that they were afraid of, and like you've built a presence, you've got the feedback, you've got the connections. So yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. And so that's all the questions in terms of long format. I have also introduced a rapid fire session. It's just a quick answers from your end. What do you prefer, Snowflake or BigQuery?
Snowflake.
Okay. And the most overrated concept in analytics engineering right now?
I would say there are no. Like, they all important in different contexts. So
the most underrated skill AEs should be building?
Probably data modeling for newcomers.
And one resource that genuinely changed how you think about data work?
I don't have one, because most of my changes happened on the work, right? So just people, okay, I have an answer. A great manager can change how you think about your work.
What are you building right now? Anything that you are most excited about and would like to share?
My book is my kind of recent building, so I'm just taking some time off. It's summer, but I will let you know once I have a new endeavor.
Just a simple question: where can people find you and the book?
For sure, yeah. Subscribe on LinkedIn. So if you search for Oleg Agapov, and I'm an analytics engineer, so I'm pretty much have everything in my title. So you will be able to find me. And the book is I sell on Gumroad. It's called Cracking the Analytics Engineering Interview. Yeah, I believe it's the only book there.
Yeah, those were all the questions for the podcast, Oleg. So thank you so much. It's been a great discussion, and I think we'll have to talk again because there's a lot of points I still have in my mind to ask in terms of analytics engineering. And I hope this was good for you as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thank you, Nima. Yeah, it was a great talk.